First, the talk would be by Dr. Nirmalya Guha from IIT
He's an associate professor at IIT BHU, and he's expert in different Indian philosophies.
Okay. So this talk is about two models of the conscious self, as you can see on the screen, and I just kind of be direct, and we begin the main talk. Now, there is a great debate which has been taking place in the field of Indian philosophy for last 2,500 years or so. It is about the nature of self. Self, you can understand self in two different ways. You can say that self is consciousness itself. This is what the Advaita Vedantins have been doing for a very long time. And another model is you can also conceptualize self as the shelter, as the house for consciousness, the seat of consciousness. So in this presentation, I will take the second interpretation of the self, that is the permanent self, which the Nayayikas believe in. So here, the debate has got two sides, as I said. So on the one side, we have the Nayayikas, basically Udayanacharya, who wrote a text called Atma Tattva Viveka. And on the other side, we have Jnanashrimitra and his disciple, Ratnakirti. They were contemporaries of Udayana. Now, they also wrote something called Kshanabhanga Adhyaya. That's part of a text which is called Jnanashrimitra Nibandhavani. So it's a very old debate, and it has never stopped. So It's an ongoing debate. Now, what is it that is being debated? It's basically the nature of self. So the Nayayika is a non-reductivist. What it means, they believe that the self is a permanent entity and you cannot reduce it to other entities. You have to accept it the way it is. And the reductionists, not just the Buddhists, the reductionist believes that the self, there's nothing over and above a few other things. So the Buddhists believe that the self is basically five skandhas or aggregates. So Vijnana, that is consciousness, Samjna, that is definition, dispositional element or samaskara, and content, object, which you can call rupa, and Vedana, that is our attitude, feeling, sukha, dukkha, and indifference, right? Pain, pleasure, and indifference. So now, if you want to look for yourself, you'll find either some kind of awareness, like this is a pot, or this is a snake, or this is something else. Or you may find some feeling. You also will find something, the subjective feeling, but this is all momentary. So there is no permanent self. Nothing remains for more than a moment. This is the Buddhist model. Now, I'll present the debate. We start with the Buddhist Paksha. It is something like this. Now, the agreement, both the sides would agree that the ordinary person, the naive person, believes that I exist and myself is it is permanent. It exists for more than one moment. It is there. And this is as they say, avivadita. There is no contest as far as this is concerned. But then the Buddhist claims that this is illusory. You have an illusory sense of this permanence. Actually, it is not there. So first we start with that. For the Buddhist, it's something like this. There are two things which the Buddhists can explain very well in their model. They think that there is nothing like a thing that exists for some time, for more than a moment. So that can explain two things very well. As I said, what is change? Now, what is change? Basically, you see different things. You think that it's one thing that is changing, but the Buddhist thinks practically it's something like this. You see this, then it slowly, the seed gives you the ankura. Now you see, actually you think that this is one thing and that thing is changing, but the Buddhist believes that actually there is not one thing. It's a stream of different things, momentary things, which are very similar to each other, but they're not the same. They're changing every moment. So every moment, one thing gives. Every moment, one thing causes another thing, and then that thing causes another. This is how, and everything is somehow similar. to the previous thing. This is how you have the illusion of one thing. Like you see, these are all different slides. This is not one slide, right? Now, it is something like a film, right? That the film is, you think that there is one Donald Duck, and that is moving, that is changing, doing this and that, but that's not true. Actually, on the celluloid, there are several different pictures which are very similar to each other. So when they move, you think that one picture is moving, but that's not true. So this is one thing. And then another thing is motion. Motion is a problem for philosophers, logicians, and mathematicians for a very long time, because it's very difficult to understand motion. So the Buddhists say, look, you come to our system, how easily we can understand motion, because motion is not being at one place. So if you think that every moment it's a different thing, you can place it at different points of time at different moments, right? If you do that, then you can explain motion well. So this is what the Buddhists say. So their philosophy is basically this, that nothing is one thing. So everything, whatever we think as one thing, is actually a stream of different things, different momentary things. Now, as I said, this or change. Now, the argument is this, because you see that there is a seed in the granary. It doesn't produce any sprout. When you put it in the field, it does. You think that it's the same seed that is doing both the jobs, producing the sprout and not producing the sprout. But that's not true. Actually, it is different momentary seeds. Now, so the point is, look, one is productive, one is unproductive. So the productive seed can't be the unproductive seed. The samartha can't be the asamartha. So what is samartha? The productive, that is the kshetrastha bija, which is there in the field. And what is asamartha? The kushulastha bija, which is there in the granary. They know the same thing because they have different incompatible qualities, right? One is productive and one is not. Since the productive is not the same as the unproductive, these are two different things. That establishes for them momentariness. They establish that you think that it's one thing, but it's not. It's actually a stream of different things. Since two compatible properties like productivity and non-productivity cannot coexist in one thing. Now, this way, they want to tell us or retell us the story of self. What is self? For them, as I said, self is actually, it's kind of, if you will reduce it to 5 different things. One is vijnana or vijnana skandha, which has got 2 parts. One, consciousness itself, that is the I consciousness, but it's momentary. It's not like the Vedika Atma that is all the time there. It's momentary. It's called alaya vijnana. And that consciousness, that is idam, which is like that, right? It's a placeholder. The place will be taken by an object, whichever object we cognize, and an object, rupa skandha. Name, samjna skandha. The moment we name something, it is samjna skandha. Or the dispositional elements are samaskaras, like raga, dvesha. So you like something, you don't. Those are dispositions. Or the last one is feeling. You are happy or you are sad. So let us retell a very short story by using this Buddhist model. I see a snake and get scared. What is it? The model is this. As I said, this is the alaya vijnana, the consciousness, momentary. So there is one I cognition and that cognition. That cognition, as I said, it's a placeholder. You have to plug something else into it, the object. So let us plug in this object. And then I don't yet know what it is. It is some object. Suddenly I can recognize it, right? So that is samjna skandha. Definition, I define it as a snake. Now then I get scared. That is the vedana skandha. Now, notice these are all different moments. It is not one thing. So actually this I, you see that it is one I, but actually there is no one I because these are different slides. So if you look at the slideshow, if you have there's the presentation mode, but otherwise you understand that these are different slides, right? So this is not just one eye. So there are several eyes, but you think it's one eye, right? So this is illusory recognition of self, but actually it is not. There is no permanent self. Now, as we recognize ourselves all the time. It is me who slept, and it is me who has, who is now awake, right? We recognize ourselves. They say that even it is a false recognition. It can happen. For example, look at this. Look at this shikha. You think it is one shikha, but that's not true, because every moment the fuel is being burnt, and then every moment a new shikha, a new flame actually is coming, is arising out of the fuel that is working at this moment. It can't be the same fuel, right? So because it is not the same fuel, it is also not the same flame. It is a current of different flames, right? All momentary flames. That's how they look at it. So the moment there is no fuel, there is no flame. Now the Nayayika counters all these things. The Nayayika tells, well, I can retell everything you tell within my framework, which believes in a permanent self. I want to refute whatever you said. First, we need to understand what they mean by their self. Now, their self is kind of one thing, as I said, a seat of cognitions and other things. Now, also, the self needs a connection to perceive or to do anything. It cannot do anything by itself. It needs, the connection is the mind. So that's the reason you think that you are watching some sports, and also you are smelling coffee and you are hearing the sound of the sports at the same time. But according to the Nayayika, you are not doing that. Every moment, the mind connects to different organs. So the organs are connected with their objects, but the mind changes its connection. So when the mind is connected with the eye, you have the visual cognition of the spots. Then immediately the mind shifts. It is connected with the ear, and you hear the sound. You had the auditory cognition. Then you smell the coffee, and because your mind gets connected with the nose, right? And then you have this olfactory cognition. It happens so quickly that you think that it's happening, as they say, alata chakra darshana. It's a fire ring. Not the fire is there everywhere because you're rotating the fire, but I see it as one ring. It is something like that. So the mind is so fast that it can, it does that thing. But basically, the self is the seat of all these things, right? And finally, you smell coffee and you desire to drink, which is another quality of the self. So all these are qualities of the self or attributes of the self. That is a cognition of sports, whatever. It may be visual. It can be some other thing. Jnana. What I mean by cognition is jnana. Or a desire, right? Here, I have the desire to have coffee, and I have coffee. By doing that, I have pleasure. So another Atma Guna, another attribute of the self, Sukha. So all these things are actually happening in me at different times, right? This is their model of the Nayayika model of self. Now they refute the Buddhist Kshanikavada argument by giving two different reasons. What? One, we perceive, everybody perceives that I exist, right? Ahamasmi, I exist. Everybody senses that. Now, this is perceptual. It's direct, not that I infer it somehow, not that somebody tells me. And no stronger rebutting cognition defeats it. So it is apratikshipta, abadhita. It never gets. Now, if you have an illusory cognition, for example, when you mistake a rope for a snake, it gets defeated by the cognition. Well, it's not a snake, it's a rope, actually. In this case, it never happens. No other jnana, no other cognition tells us that, well, it is not yourself, you are somebody else, or you don't exist. It never happens. As long as I'm there, I exist. I feel that I exist. This feeling or this cognition is abadhita, and I never doubt it. So it is asandigdha. So we need a very strong evidence to claim that this is illusory. Unless you find it, don't tell me that myself or my cognition of self, rather, is illusory. The second is the inference. What is it? This they call pratisandhana. Udayana calls it pratisandhana. It is something like this. I infer that I have been existing all these days since I, who saw it that day, am recognizing it now. So I think the text goes like, Yoham ghatam adraksham soham idanim sprushami. So I, who saw it that day, am recognizing it now. That recognition tells me that, well, I have been existing all the time. So perhaps I saw it on the 1st June, on June 1, 2020. And after 23 days on June 24, I touch it and I recognize it. And I feel that, well, yes, it's the same thing. Now, in this case, it's a sprout, some leaves, whatever. Now, I touch the same sprout after 23 days. I have to exist all these 23 days, right? So that means that kind of, and there is another thing. Also, I have the feeling, this eka kartrikatva, it's the same agent that saw it that day. The agent is karta, right? I have this feeling, I owned it that day, the perception of it, the experience of it. Today, I recognize it, right? So this eka kartrikatva cannot be explained if the self is not permanent, if it is changing if it is every moment a different self, right? Because then the link is lost. The sameness is established, the sameness itself establishes numerical identity. That is, whatever these two selves, the experiencing self and the recognizing self, are the same thing. They're numerically identical. Now, I'm sure most of us know what numerical identity means, but if somebody wants to see it again, so qualitative identity is something like, two identical twins. They're qualitatively identical, but they're not the same entity. But numerical identity is this. Even if this person changes, I can see that look at this right side person, even if this person changes, he is numerically identical to himself, right? Change does not harm his identity. So this is called numerical identity. So we are talking about numerical identity, tadatmya. So the Nayayika gives these two arguments, and in response, the Buddhist says that look, as they said previously, opposite and incompatible properties can't coexist in an entity, as they said. Now, as the seed that was their stock example, it could not at the same time be productive and unproductive. A productive seed is not an unproductive seed. So they're different, right? So similarly, the self which had the knowledge of something at some point, and the self without that knowledge can't be the same, because absence and its counterpositive, its counterpart, cannot be there at the same time at one thing. So there must be different things. But the Nayayika answers that some opposing properties, they have this atyantika virodha. They will never exist in a thing at any point of time. So if something is eternal, by no means, at no point, it is non-eternal. It is mortal. Always it is eternal. And vice versa. If something is mortal, it is never eternal. But not that all opposing properties are the same. Some opposing properties can exist in a thing. So they, as they call it, saha anavasthana virodha. But it is temporal. So at one moment it is there, at some other moment it's not there. Here, in this case, productivity and unproductivity, samarthya and asamarthya, are such opposing properties. They can't coexist in a thing at the same time, but they can be there in one thing at different times. So they don't have that atyantika virodha. So the self has such kind of incompatible properties. It's not the same time. At different times, it can house different attributes and different things. So sometime the seed was unproductive, now it is productive. Now their opposition does not harm the identity of the seed. This is the Nayayika's counterpoint rather. And yeah, fine, I covered this. Now, the Buddha says, look, you are saying that you recognize yourself, but recognition can be false. Here you have a false recognition, as I said, this flame, shikha. The Nayayika answers, well, let me add this rejoinder. You didn't notice that I said, not that every recognition. Yeah, you recognize that it's the same flame, but it's not the same. Think of a raining cloud. It is raining every moment, right? So it is every time different because, those water, water drops are not there. The water drops that were forming that cloud the previous moment are not there. So it's a different cloud every moment, right? So the flame, definitely, it's not the same flame. It's not the same river, for example. You cannot step twice on the same river. as Heraclitus said. You think that it's the same Gangaji, but it's not the same water because that water has gone. So similarly, it's not the same flame, but you can have false recognition. That's what the Buddhist said. But the Nayayika says, well, in this case, I can understand that my pratyabhigna, my pratisandhana, my recognition is associated with viruddha dharma, that is opposing properties. I understand, I can argue that it can't be the same because they have viruddha dharma. What is it? Because every moment the old fuel is gone. It's a new fuel. So therefore it's a new flame. I know that. So the newness and the oldness, or this whatever jatatva, ajatatva, whichever way you call it, atitatva and vartamanatva. So presentness and pastness, they can't be there in the same flame. Therefore, it's momentary. I understand, but not that my self-cognition, my sense of self is not like that. Why not? Because there is no opposition at all. So the opposition there, in the case of the flame, was coming from the fact that the fuel is getting burnt, right? The fuel is getting burnt, the wick is getting burnt, right? Every moment. So I know that there is a virodha, there is an opposition. There is a contradiction if I accept it to be one single flame. But in this case, I see an ice cream, whatever, burger, coffee, whatever, some moment, and then I like it, and then I taste it, and I have different things at different times. What tells me that there is an opposition? What tells me there is a conflict? So if we have an unconflicted pratyabhignana, that is recognition, that proves that it is one thing. Otherwise, ekatvo cheda prasangaha. There would be no oneness in the whole world, right? Because if you say that recognition itself is always wrong, then there would be no one thing, because one thing itself will be kind of impossible. So that's a prasanga. That's an undesired thing, even for the Buddhist. So therefore, because this is viruddha dharma asamsrushta, because this kind of recognition, the self-recognition, is not attached with or is not associated with any viruddha dharma, you must accept it to be one single self. And so it actually is a connection, the self. So the self which saw this thing, this sprout that day, is now saying, look, there's a connection between the experience, the experiencer and the recognizer. That connection goes all through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all these days of calendar, all these 24 days. This connection has been existing, right? What else is this connection? It must be myself. This is how the Nayayika argues. They present self as this connection. So the Buddhist theory, according to them, has nothing to explain the connection between the experience and recognition. The self explains the same agency of these two cognitive events. So the Buddhist says, no, we also have a connector. What is it? In our case, the causal relation actually does the job. What is our causal relation? It's basically this. So two different people, but these are two different moments, right? And each one moment is giving birth to another moment, right? So they have a causal relationship. And these two causal relationships are different. One causal relation, they call upadano upadeya bhava, is giving one stream, the stream of, say, Tom, and another causal relation, look at the other, the blue line, is creating the other set of selves, right? Like you have two characters on your television. One is Mickey and one is Donald, right? So you see, there are two different streams, definitely. Although every moment it's a new Mickey and every moment it's a new Donald, but it is true that there are two different streams and their causality, the causally connected pictures, right? At the same place, whatever, think of a celluloid or something. That for them is the connector, this upadano upadeya bhava. But then, so yes, so this is the formulation of that, this intimate causal relation ensures and regulates the sameness of a single stream that creates the stream. But the stream is one, but the things are discrete and different, right? Like this. It is one stream, the dark one and the blue one, whatever, the brown one and the blue one. They're different streams, two different streams, but each stream consists of different concrete moments, right? Now, the Nayayika says if this kind of upadanopadaya bhava, causal relation, could regulate sameness, then you see the Acharya Buddhi, the Guru's understanding, causes a similar understanding in the disciple, right? So when I teach somebody, I transfer my understanding to my student. So in that sense, it is caused. His understanding is caused by mine. Look, there is a causal relationship. That doesn't make him me or me him. We are still different, right? So, which is to say that this causal relationship doesn't explain the sameness of the same agent who saw something and who now recognizes that very thing. So this is the argument. And now this debate is still very important. I couldn't show it here. I'm writing a paper on that. Basically, most modern scientists believe, neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, they believe that actually self is reducible to other things. And most of them also believe that they're momentary. There is no one self that persists for some time. Now, for them, this is a very, very important argument. I wanted to show in this presentation that if you believe in this, you probably could answer all these arguments that come from their side, from neuroscientists, psychologists, and cognitive scientists. But then that's not the end of it. Definitely, the reductionists or the reductivists have their own argument. The debate goes on. So here a few texts I used, Atma Tattva Viveka of Udayana, and then this Sarvadarshana Samgraha. For the Buddhist part, I took help from this book. And then a translation is available, you can see, of Atma Tattva Viveka. You can see that on screen. Few papers there. I mentioned one paper by Lane, Joy Lane, and one book I mentioned from my university. In fact, my supervisor and his friend and his supervisees edited this one. It's this Buddhist, I think, Hindu and Buddhist ideas in dialogue, self and non-self. So here it is.